Let me tell you about a night I will never forget. My name is Alex, and at the time, I was a bartender at an upscale nightclub called Eclipse. It was one of those dimly lit, high energy places where people came to lose themselves in the music, the drinks, and sometimes their secrets. The club was located in a refurbished warehouse downtown, a shadowy building with graffiti covered walls outside and pulsating neon lights within. It was the kind of place that felt alive, where people's inhibitions melted under the bass heavy beats. That night started like any other Friday night. The place was packed, the music was deafening, and I was slinging drinks as fast as my hands could move. But then I noticed her. She was stunning, wearing a long, crimson dress that seemed out of place among the usual club attire. While most people gravitated toward the bar or the dance floor, she stood near the back of the room, just watching. Her pale skin glowed in the dim light, and her jet black hair hung in stark contrast against her dress. Her lips, painted the same shade of red as her dress, curled into the faintest smile when she caught me staring. At first, I didn't think much of it. Strange people come through Eclipse all the time, but something about her felt off. She wasn't drinking, she wasn't dancing, she didn't even seem to be talking to anyone, just standing there, scanning the room like she was searching for someone or something. Around midnight, things took a turn. One of the bouncers, Rick, came up to me at the bar. He was pale and visibly shaken, which was unusual for a guy his size. "Hey Alex, have you seen a girl in a red dress? Long black hair?" I froze. "Yeah, she's over by the back wall. Why?" Rick swallowed hard and glanced over his shoulder. "Man, I swear I just saw her in the VIP lounge upstairs. When I blinked, she was gone." I looked back toward where she'd been standing, but now she was gone. I scanned the room and spotted her again. This time, she was weaving through the crowd toward the side exit. Rick and I exchanged a look, and without another word, we both moved toward the door she'd gone through. Outside, the alley behind the club was dimly lit by a single flickering streetlight. The air was heavy with the smell of spilled beer and garbage. She was standing at the far end of the alley, her back to us. "Miss? Are you okay?" She didn't move. Rick took a step closer. "Hey, I'm talking to..." She turned around and my stomach dropped. Eyes. They were pitch black. No whites, no pupils, just empty voids. And that faint smile from earlier had twisted into something grotesque, like she was baring her teeth. "Leave," she said in a voice that sounded like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Rick grabbed my arm and started pulling me back toward the club. Before we could take more than a few steps, the alley seemed to stretch, the walls closing in like a tunnel. The air turned ice cold, and the flickering streetlight went out entirely. That's when we heard it. A low growl, followed by the sound of footsteps coming toward us. I couldn't see her anymore, but I could feel her presence closing in. "Run," Rick hissed. We bolted back into the club, slamming the door behind us. The music and lights felt jarringly normal after what we'd just experienced. But as we stood there, catching our breath, something caught my eye. On the security monitor behind the bar, the feed from the alley showed her standing there, staring directly into the camera. Her lips moved, but there was no sound. Then, one by one, every monitor in the club went black. The rest of the night passed in a blur. The girl never came back inside, but no one else saw her leave. Rick and I decided to check the footage the next morning. When we reviewed the tape, our blood went cold. There she was, standing in the club at different points throughout the night, sometimes at the bar, sometimes on the dance floor, and once, horrifyingly, right behind me as I mixed drinks. But in every frame, no one else seemed to notice her. We quit that day, both of us. I don't know what she was or what she wanted, but I do know this. Eclipse shut down a few months later. Rumor has it that someone died in that alley years ago. A girl in a red dress. Justice came in an unexpected way. The club owner, who had a history of shady dealings, was arrested for fraud and other crimes. Eclipse was demolished shortly after, replaced by a parking lot. But sometimes late at night, when the city's quiet, I swear I can still hear the faint echo of her voice. Leave. My name is Jessica. I used to be a DJ at Pulse, a trendy nightclub tucked into the heart of a city that really never sleeps. It was one of those spots where the music never stops, and the lights flicker in dizzying patterns, and strangers grind against each other as if they'd known each other for years. But behind all the smoke and strobe lights, there's something no one tells you about places like that. Something I learned the hard way. It happened one Friday night. The kind of night where the air feels electric and every corner of the club is packed. I was in the booth setting up the next track when I noticed her. A girl in a silver dress. She was petite, with blonde hair that fell in waves past her shoulders. She stood by the far wall, looking uneasy, like she didn't belong there. At first, I didn't think much of it, but as the night went on, I started to notice she wasn't dancing, drinking, or talking to anyone, just lingering. Around midnight, she caught my eye again. She was at the edge of the dance floor now, looking toward the VIP section, her face pale under the flashing lights. I felt a weird twinge of concern. People came to Pulse to lose themselves, not to look like they were trapped in a nightmare. Then she turned her head, and I swear she looked straight at me. Her lips parted like she was about to say something, but instead she raised her hand, just a little, like a half-hearted wave, and disappeared into the crowd. I brushed it off as a weird coincidence, until an hour later, one of the bartenders, Liam, came to me, his face grim. Jessica, you seen a girl in a silver dress anywhere? Yeah, I saw her earlier. Why? A guy came up looking for her. Said she's his sister. Apparently she's been missing for 3 days. My stomach dropped. Missing? I replayed the scene in my head. Uneasy stance, her wave, her vanishing act. Something was wrong. The man looking for her showed up soon after. He was tall, with sunken eyes and a voice rough from worry. He handed me a picture of her on his phone, and it was definitely the same girl I'd seen earlier. She texted me from this address, said she needed help. He explained, his voice cracking. I immediately checked the security footage. We scrolled through the cameras, watching her enter the club, wander around aimlessly, and finally head toward the back hallway near the bathrooms. The strange thing was, she never came out. The man and I, along with Liam, the bartender, rushed to that hallway. narrow and dim, lined with doors leading to the bathrooms, the staff break room, and a storage closet. We searched every inch of it. Nothing. No girl. No sign she'd ever been there. Then Liam noticed something. The door at the very end of the hallway, half hidden by a velvet curtain. It was marked staff only, but neither of us had ever seen it used. The man didn't hesitate. He pushed it open, and we were hit by the smell of something foul. Inside was a staircase leading down to what looked like a basement. The air grew colder with every step we took, and the darkness seemed to press in around us. At the bottom, we found a room. It was small, windowless, and filled with nothing but a rusty metal table and an old chair. On the table sat a single phone, her phone. It buzzed as we approached, lighting up with a message. Help me. Then, just as suddenly, the lights in the room flickered and went out. The man shouted her name, his voice echoing off the walls. What we all heard in response was a faint sound, like something being dragged across the floor above us. Panic set in and we bolted back upstairs. The hallway was empty, the club roaring as if nothing had happened. As we stood there catching our breath, the man froze, pointing to the crowd. There she was, the girl in the silver dress, standing in the middle of the dance floor. But something about her was wrong. Her face was blank, her movement still. She wasn't dancing, just swaying unnaturally, like a puppet on strings. Before we could reach her, lights cut out, plunging the club into total darkness. The music stopped, replaced by a chilling silence. When the lights flickered back on a second later, she was gone. The police came after the man called them, but they didn't find anything. The staff-only room, empty. The security footage, corrupted. No trace of the girl or where she'd gone. A few months later, the club shut down after the remains of another missing girl was found in the basement. A few months later, the club shut down after the remains of another missing girl were found in the building's basement during renovations. Her death was ruled a homicide, but no suspect was ever caught. I don't work in nightclubs anymore. Sometimes I can still hear the faint buzz of that phone and see her face in my mind. A face that seemed to be crying out for help, even as it disappeared into the shadows. My name is Megan. I used to work at a nightclub called Lunar. It was known for its wild parties and club atmosphere. Nestled on the top floor of a high-rise, the place was luxurious, but always felt a little too detached from the real world. The floors shimmered under strobe lights, and the glass walls offered breathtaking views of the city. But no matter how glamorous it seemed, there was always something unnerving about that place, especially the VIP room. It was tucked away in a far corner, behind an unmarked black door. Only certain guests were allowed in. Big spenders, celebrities, and the occasional shady character you wouldn't want to meet in an alley. We were told never to ask questions about what went on in there, just to bring drinks and leave. One Saturday night, the club was packed, as usual. The bass of the music vibrated through my body, and I was rushing between tables, delivering overpriced bottles of champagne. Around midnight, I got a call on my headset. "Megan, bring a bottle of Dom to VIP," my manager said. I grabbed the bottle and made my way to the black door. Normally, I'd knock and wait for someone to let me in, but this time, the door was slightly ajar. The hallway beyond was pitch black, and the muffled music from the club felt like it was coming from miles away. "Hello?" I called out, pushing the door open wider. No answer, just silence. I hesitated, then stepped inside, my heels clicking against the floor. The VIP room was dimly lit with a single chandelier, its bulbs flickering. The room was empty, or so I thought. As I placed the champagne on the table, I noticed something strange. A glass of red wine spilled across the floor. It wasn't just a casual spill. The liquid looked deliberately smeared, like someone had dragged their fingers through it. That's when I heard it. A faint sound, like whispering, coming from the far corner. "Hello? Is someone there?" The whisper stopped. I edged closer to the corner. As my eyes adjusted to the shadows, I saw a figure sitting in one of the plush armchairs. It was a man dressed in a black suit, his head tilted down. His face was obscured, but his hands rested on the armrests, unnaturally pale under the flickering light. "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't move. I stepped back, ready to leave, when the door slammed shut behind me. The chandelier above flickered wildly, and the man in the chair slowly lifted his head. His eyes were pitch black, his mouth stretched into an impossibly wide grin. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice layered as if a dozen people were speaking at once. I froze, every muscle in my body locked in terror. Then he stood up, his movements jerky, almost inhuman. I turned and ran, fumbling for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Behind me, I could hear him moving closer, his footsteps unnervingly even, like he was dragging one leg. I pounded on the door, screaming for help. Suddenly, the whispers started again, louder this time, filling the room. It sounded like a crowd, all speaking at once, but I couldn't understand a word. Then the door flew open, and I stumbled into the hallway. My manager was standing there, his face pale. "What are you doing?" "There's someone in there." He pushed past me and flicked on the light. The room was empty, the spilled wine, the man in the chair, all gone. I quit the next day, but I couldn't shake what I'd just seen. A few weeks later, I found out that the club had a dark history. Years ago, the VIP room had been the scene of a brutal murder. A businessman had been killed during a private party, and the case was never solved. The club eventually shut down after a raid of uncovered illegal activities. The owner was arrested, and the building was abandoned. Sometimes I drive past it and see the top floor, dark and lifeless. But every so often, I think I see a faint flicker of light in the VIP room, and I wonder if he's still there, waiting for the next person foolish enough to walk through that door.